converting raw data into Z-score in Excel and SPSS. Converting raw data into Z-score in Excel. Z-score is a standard score that has a normal distribution with a mean equal to 0 and a standard deviation equal to 1. When converting normally distributed raw data into a Z-score, the standard Z-score distribution will be the same as the normal raw data. Why do we convert data into Z-score? Z-score allow comparisons between group of data or groups of data that are measured at different unit or different scale. Here in this Excel, I had inserted a data for 100 cases, and we have here three set of data, or three groups of data: data 1, data 2, data 3, to compare the scores within these data. We will convert the data into a Z-score as given here in the formula. Z is equal to X minus the sample mean divided by the standard deviation. So to calculate the Z-score for data 1, 2, and 3, we first have to calculate the mean and the standard deviation for each one of these data set. And to do that, click here in this cell and insert the equal sign, and then type average and select the average function or commands, and then select the range of the data to calculate the average for. Click on the score here in this data 1, select Control Shift and select the arrow key that's pointing to the down or below arrow key. The data are selected, and then click on enter. A mean is calculated for data 1. To auto calculate and auto fill the mean for the rest of the set of data, select the cell here, hold, drag, and then release. A mean is calculated for the rest of the data. To calculate the standard deviation, insert the equal sign, then type standard deviation or ST, and then scroll and select the standard deviation for the sample for S. Once this selected, select the range for the scores to enter. For data 1, we're going to select the first score, and then click on Control Shift, and then keep holding Control Shift and click on the arrow heading down arrow. This set of data will be selected. Click on enter. A standard deviation is calculated for data number 1. To autofill and auto calculate the standard deviation for the rest of the data, hold, drag, and release. Now we have the mean and the standard deviation for each set of data, and I'm going just to reduce the decimal into decimal figure as shown here into 1 decimal point. Now we have the mean and the standard deviation. I'm going to use this formula to calculate the Z-score for data number 1. To do that, click here, insert the equal sign, open a bracket, select the first score from data 1, add minus sign, select the mean for the data 1, and we're going to do to make this value as an absolute reference. So click on F4 and then close the bracket, divide that by the standard deviation for data number 1, We're going to make that as absolute reference. So click on F4, then click on enter. A z-score is calculated for the first score in the data labeled 1. To autofill and auto-calculate for the rest of the score, hold and then drag and then release to autofill and auto-calculate. So a standard score is generated for each individual score in this raw data number 1. To calculate the z-score for the second data set, repeat the same thing. Insert the equal sign, open a bracket, select the score from data 2, and then add a minus sign, then select the mean for data 2 and make that as a reference, absolute reference. Close the bracket, divide that by the standard deviation and click on enter. A z-score is calculated for the first score. To autofill and auto calculate, drag, hold and release. A z-score is generated for data number 2 and the same for data number 3. Bracket, insert the score from data number 3, the first score, add a minus sign, then insert the mean for data number 3, make that as an absolute reference, close the bracket, divide that by the standard deviation for data number 3, make that as a reference, click on enter. Z-score is generated for the first score in the data and auto fill and auto calculate the rest of the z-score for the scores in data 3. So here we have now all the data for data 1, 2 and 3 has been converted or transformed into z-score that has a mean of 0 and standard deviation of 1. Thus it will be easier here to compare the scores in between these 3 different groups. So this is the way to convert raw data into z-score in Excel. Converting raw data into z-score in SPSS. Z-score is a standard score. The distribution of the z-score are normal. Z-score have a normal distribution with a mean of 0 and standard deviation of 1. Converting raw data into z-score permits comparison between variables that are measured at different units. The z-score value can be plus or minus or 0. Plus value means that the score is higher than the mean. Minus value indicates that the z-score is lower than the mean. And a score of 0 represents a mean value. Here in this SPSS data view, I have inserted 100 cases and 3 different variables labeled as data 1, data 2 and data 3. Each one of these variable is measured at a different unit, and to compare the score within each data with another data, we need to convert this raw data into a z-score. These data are normally distributed, but each one of them have a mean and a standard deviation. If we click on analyze and then scroll down to descriptive and then click on frequency, and in the frequency here I'm going to show the means and standard deviation for those variables. So if I click on statistics, I'm going to add the mean here and the standard deviation, and for chart I'm also going to look at the normal distribution of these variables. And then if I click on OK, a table will be generated which shows the mean and the standard deviation for each variable, and there is a variation. So each variable has its own mean and standard deviation, as shown here by data 1 is normally distributed, and data 2, and likewise data 3. So these are normally distributed, but they have different mean and different standard deviation. To standardize the score or the scores, we're going to transform this data into z-score. And the way to do that is, again, click on Analyze, scroll down to Descriptive Statistics, and then scroll down to Descriptive, and on the Descriptive select these three variables and drag them into the variable section. Click here on Save Standardized Value as Variables. So this, by clicking this, the software will convert the scores in each one of these variables into a z-score. In options, we are going just only to stick with mean and standard deviation. Click on Continue and then click on OK. Again here, the software has generated a z-score for each of the variable. Z-score for data 1, 2, and 3. And the score within the z-score can be either minus or positive. Minus indicate that the score is lower than the mean, and positive it's higher than the mean. And through this it is possible to compare between scores within those variables. Those z-score value are normally distributed similar to the distribution of the raw data, but they have a mean of 0 and a standard deviation of 1. To double check that, click on Analyze, then click on Descriptive, and in Descriptive we're going to move all of these into the variable box, and I'm going to untick this, and for options we're going to leave the mean and the standard deviation checked. Click on Continue and then OK. A table here is generated showing that data 1, raw data 1, before converting into z-score and after. So we can see here in the z-score the mean is 0 and the standard deviation is 1. And if we examine further the histogram for each of this z-score, we will find out also they are normally distributed, and this can be done through if we click on Analyze Frequency and then click on Move these into the variable box here, and then for chart select histogram. We are not that interested in the stats at this stage, and click on OK. A histogram for each of the raw data and the z-score data is produced, and as we can see here, for data 1 the distribution is normal, for data 2 is normal, for data 3 is normal. So this is the way to convert raw data into z-score in SPSS.